Have you ever followed advice that sounded so smart? You didn't even feel nervous losing $3,000? No scam. No one disappeared. No gambling. No reckless all-in move. Just a very ordinary moment when someone spoke with absolute confidence. This is safe. You can't lose. Mike listened. He nodded. Not because he was greedy, but because he felt relieved. The $3,000 left Mike's account quietly. No alarms, no urgent emails, no sense of danger at all. A few weeks later, Mike opened his banking app and realized something strange. The money was gone somewhere, but the feeling of safety had disappeared first. Do you know why Mike really lost the money? Keep watching this video because Mike's mistake isn't rare. It's dangerous precisely because it doesn't look dangerous at all. From the outside, Mike looked like the kind of person everyone would call fine. He had a steady job. His paycheck arrived on time. His bills were paid every month. No credit card debt. No luxury lifestyle. No one looked at Mike and thought he was in financial trouble. But only Mike knew how he really felt. After paying rent, insurance, food, gas, and other fixed expenses, Mike was left with about $300 to $400 a month. Not enough to call it serious savings. Not enough to build a real emergency fund. And definitely not enough for Mike to feel confident that if something unexpected happened, losing his job, getting sick, a car repair, he'd be able to handle it. Mike wasn't poor, but he constantly felt like he was standing right at the edge. And this is the most dangerous psychological state in personal finance. When you have plenty, you have time to think. When you have nothing, you're forced to be cautious, but when you're doing okay without being secure, your brain doesn't look for truth. It looks for certainty. At that time, Mike didn't have a clear financial system. He didn't know exactly where his money was going. He had no consistent saving rules, no long-term investment plan. Every money decision was reactive. Money came in, he spent it. Stress showed up, he looked for a quick solution. And it was in that exact state that the sure thing advice appeared. It wasn't complicated. It didn't require learning anything new. It didn't ask Mike to wait for years. It promised just one simple thing: peace of mind. Mike wasn't thinking about getting rich fast. He was thinking about sleeping better. He believed that if he could do something with his money, the anxiety would ease. The human brain behaves strangely around money. When unease drags on, it doesn't search for the optimal solution. It searches for the fastest way to end discomfort. And confident-sounding advice becomes a temporary painkiller. They sound so sure, and it must be fine. I'm not the only one doing this. If I don't try, what if I miss out? Fear of missing out isn't loud, it whispers, and it convinces you that not acting is the real risk. Mike began rationalizing his decision. $3,000 wasn't a small amount, but it wasn't his entire life either. Compared to many years of working, Mike told himself he had earned more than that before. What Mike didn't realize at the time was this: he didn't invest because he understood. He invested because he wanted to feel safe. And when a financial decision is made purely to soothe emotions, its outcome almost always is already determined. Mike didn't lose $3,000 because he picked the wrong stock. He didn't lose money because the market crashed or because of a sudden downturn. Mike lost money because he trusted someone else's confidence. The $3,000 went into a private investment, a private deal, not traded on any exchange, with no public pricing and no ability to sell whenever he wanted. But at the time, Mike wasn't thinking about any of that. What he remembered most clearly was the voice of the person who introduced the deal. That person spoke with certainty. No hesitation, no doubt. This is safe. No need to review complicated reports. No long waiting period. And the final line: it's almost impossible to lose. That confidence did something extremely dangerous. It replaced the entire verification process Mike should have gone through. Mike wasn't clearly told what his money would be used for. He didn't know where profits were supposed to come from. He didn't know where his money would sit in a worst-case scenario. But he trusted it, because the other person spoke as if all risks had already been accounted for. And this is a deadly blind spot in personal finance that many working people fall into. We often mistake someone else's confidence for safety for our money. There's a simple truth Mike only understood after losing the money. The person making the recommendation takes no risk. Mike is the one putting up the cash. And when things go wrong, only Mike stays with the consequences. At first, everything still felt fine. Mike didn't check often. He saw no reason to doubt. But when the project began running into trouble, he realized something unsettling. He had no ability to act. He couldn't withdraw his money. He couldn't sell. He couldn't cut his losses. Not because anyone disappeared, but because the nature of the investment had no exit from the start. Only then did Mike begin asking the questions he hadn't asked before. What if I need the money urgently? How do I actually get my money back? Who controls the cash flow after I transfer it? By then, those questions were too late. Another thing Mike learned only after losing the money: the investments that sound the safest are often the least transparent. There was no market price to track, no public chart to compare, no clear way to know where he stood. Everything existed on trust. And in finance, trust is not a mechanism that protects money. By putting the entire $3,000 into a single deal, Mike left himself with no options, no small test, no verification, no worst-case plan. And that's when Mike understood a principle no one had ever said to him directly. In finance, where there is no exit, there is no investment. Only hidden risk. Mike didn't buy an investment strategy. He bought borrowed peace of mind. And $3,000 was the price of that lesson. The moment Mike realized he had lost the money wasn't dramatic at all. No red alerts, no panicked phone calls, no emails saying, "There's a problem with your account." It was just a very ordinary morning. Mike opened his banking app like he always did. The balance looked fine. Too fine. The problem was, the money had left long ago. The $3,000 was sitting inside a private investment Mike couldn't see, couldn't control, and didn't even know whether it was alive or dead. He sent a message. The reply came slowly, very slowly. At first, it was the usual lines. The project is adjusting. It needs more time. The market is difficult. Mike waited, because he had no other choice. The first week, he wasn't worried. By the second week, he checked his phone more often. After 2 months, Mike realized he wasn't waiting for profits anymore. He was just waiting for a clear answer. And that's when it really started to hurt. Not because the money was gone, but because Mike realized something worse. A bad decision doesn't hurt right away. It hurts by taking away your ability to act. He couldn't sell. He couldn't withdraw. He couldn't cut his losses. There was no market, no price chart, no sell button. Only a familiar promise. Everything will be fine. By then, the $3,000 wasn't money anymore. It had become a blank space in his mind. Then the message Mike didn't want to read arrived. At the moment, a refund isn't possible. Not it's gone, just you can't get it back. But Mike understood very clearly. When your money sits in a place with no exit, in practical terms, it no longer belongs to you. The $3,000 didn't vanish in a single day. It died slowly from the moment Mike stepped into a decision he couldn't escape on his own. And that was when he understood. Losing money isn't the worst thing. Losing your ability to choose is. $3,000 isn't just $3,000. After accepting the reality that the $3,000 was almost impossible to recover, Mike thought the worst pain was over. But the most uncomfortable part was just beginning when he started thinking about what didn't happen because of that decision. Mike didn't just lose $3,000, he lost everything that money could have created. In finance, this is called opportunity cost, the price of choosing the wrong path. Not measured by the money you lost, but by the better outcomes you'll never get. Mike began looking back over the months that followed. There were times he needed cash urgently, but his emergency fund was too thin. That $3,000, if it had still been in his account, could have helped him breathe a little easier for a few months. But it wasn't there anymore. It was sitting somewhere he couldn't reach. Then Mike did a very simple calculation. If that $3,000 had just been kept in a basic savings account, he would have retained flexibility. If it had been invested steadily into a simple index fund with an average return of around 6 to 7% per year, after 10 years it would still be $3,000. Not to get rich fast, but to build a stable foundation. But because of that private investment, the $3,000 didn't just sit still. It disappeared from Mike's future. And this is what very few people realize. When you lose money this way, you don't lose it once you lose it twice. The first time is when you transfer the money. The second time is when you lose the chance to use it for better decisions. While the $3,000 was frozen, Mike was forced into less optimal choices. Sometimes he had to delay important plans. Sometimes he missed smaller, more transparent investment opportunities, simply because his money was stuck somewhere with no exit. That's an opportunity cost. It never shows up on a bank statement. It doesn't send you a bill. It doesn't appear as a red number. It only exists quietly in the moments when you say, "If only I had." Mike also came to a bitter realization. The investments marketed as the safest are often the most expensive in opportunity cost because they take away time, choices, and the ability to correct mistakes. $3,000 isn't just $3,000. It's stolen time, missed better decisions, delayed financial security. And that's when Mike realized a bad financial decision doesn't just take your money today, it takes away a better version of you in the future. Change in Mike wasn't his bank account. The $3,000 didn't come back. But what truly disappeared and forced Mike to face it was his habit of handing financial decisions to other people. Before the loss, Mike was someone who searched for advice. When he felt anxious, he asked. When he felt unsure, he listened. And when he heard an answer that sounded confident enough, he followed it. That wasn't wrong, until he realized an uncomfortable truth. Following advice is not the same as understanding. Every time Mike followed advice without understanding, he was unconsciously shifting responsibility to someone else. But money doesn't do that. Money doesn't know who gave the advice. It only knows who decided to move it. No one signed for Mike when things went wrong. No one lost sleep for him. No one carried the consequences but him. That was the moment Mike stopped asking the familiar question, "What should I do?" and started asking harder but correct questions. Why am I doing this? Where exactly will my money go? What could cause this to fail? How do I get out if it doesn't work? This shift didn't make Mike smarter overnight, but it slowed him down. And in finance, slowing down is often a sign of maturity. Mike began building a very simple system. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just clear rules that protected him. Never put money into something he doesn't understand. Never trust promises without a mechanism. And never allow 100% of the money he could lose to sit in a place with no exit. He also learned to accept a truth he once hated. Doing nothing is sometimes a good decision. Missing an opportunity doesn't make you poor, but stepping into something you don't understand almost always will. Mike no longer looked for peace of mind in someone else's confident voice. He found it in knowing exactly what he was doing. That peace came slower, but it lasted longer. It didn't depend on anyone else. It lived in his ability to assess risk himself. At the end of this journey, Mike understood something simple but critical. There are no safe financial decisions, only decisions you understand well enough to take responsibility for. $3,000 was the price Mike paid to cross the line between two types of people: those who follow advice and those who take responsibility. From then on, Mike still made mistakes, but every mistake was the result of conscious choice, not misplaced trust. And that is financial freedom at its most basic level. Not having more money, but no longer handing your financial fate to someone else. After everything, $3,000 isn't what Mike remembers most. What he remembers is sitting in front of his phone realizing that money doesn't disappear by accident. It leaves because of a decision made too early, before you fully understand what you're doing. The lesson Mike took away isn't "don't trust anyone." It's this: don't hand your financial decisions to someone else. You can listen to advice, you can learn from those who came before you, but once money leaves your hands, responsibility always stays. In finance, safety doesn't come from confident promises. It comes from understanding risk and accepting it consciously. If this story made you pause before your next decision, leave a comment with what stood out to you. And if you want to avoid costly mistakes before you start thinking about getting rich, subscribe to the channel so you and Mike can learn how to protect your money and then let it work for you the right way.